A few weeks ago, I ran an online poll to see which tools you use every day to protect your internet connection. The results are eye-opening. 39% of you use a paid VPN, 10% use Tor, 5% use a proxy or a VPS, and 47% either don't use anything at all or rely on a free VPN, which in practice is almost the same as using nothing. Over a third of you rely on a paid mainstream VPN. That's good news because a trustworthy VPN does protect your communications and lowers your exposure. But whether you're connected on a coffee shop Wi-Fi, your neighbor's router, or behind a VPN, a VPS, Tor, or a I2P, or even a mix of all that running on a hardened operating system, I'm going to show you how, in the context of a targeted investigation, law enforcement can still trace you back through your IP address and expose your identity. Law enforcement and intelligence services don't investigate with the same tools you do or on the same battlefield. They combine online technical traces with offline elements, exploit weaknesses in configurations, and most of all, human mistakes. You paid with cryptocurrency, used fake personal details, picked a VPN like Mulvad that doesn't require an email or ID, and you think you're untraceable. Think again. This is where most people start piling up mistakes. Most cryptocurrencies are not anonymous. No-log VPNs don't erase your own traceable behavior, and a single weak link is enough to put the puzzle back together and unmask you. If you're just starting out, remember this. Anonymity is not the same as pseudonymity. A pseudonym hides your real name. Anonymity means preventing any link between an action and a person. A VPN hides your public IP address and encrypts your traffic between you and the VPN server. It can make it look like you're in another country, and it protects against data interception. But when an investigation is aimed at a specific user, at best it slows down identification and it does not make you invisible. True anonymity is extremely hard to achieve, and only a few advanced users come close by controlling every single technical and behavioral link in the chain. Because the real issue isn't just about the tools, it's about online and offline correlations, timing patterns, usage fingerprints, DNS leaks, and all those habits that give you away. Your best weapon is your level of knowledge, your understanding of investigative techniques, and above all, your OPSEC, operational security, which is about consistently reducing every attack surface. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a while since I last posted a dedicated video. I've been heavily involved in fighting the European chat control proposal. You've probably heard of it already. It's a regulation that could bring mass surveillance to Europe. If not, I'll leave a link to my video on that topic. There are 1,000 ways to connect to the internet and millions of possible combinations between devices, computers, phones, tablets, operating systems, languages, browsers, and countless opportunities to leave unique traces that can lead back to you. Here, we lay out the basic techniques commonly used by police and intelligence investigators worldwide, step by step, and in plain language. We won't be able to cover every single scenario though, so feel free to join the channel's Discord to discuss specifics. The piece of information investigators most often use to identify you is the IP address, paired with a timestamp. In other words, an exact time. Think of an IP address like a license plate on the internet. It identifies the exit point through which your traffic leaves to reach the network. It comes in two formats, IPv4 and IPv6. At home, with your router, you have private IP addresses, one for each device on your Wi-Fi to identify them inside your local network, and a single public IP address visible on the internet. All your connected devices share that same public IP as seen from the outside. And sometimes, like on mobile networks, a single public IP can be shared among several subscribers. The key thing to remember is that your ISP, your internet service provider, keeps connection logs that say which IP was assigned to which subscription and when. The IP plus the timestamp can tell investigators which person holding that subscription was using the IP at that moment. We need the IP address for a very simple reason. When you request a web page, your device sends small packets of data that include the destination address, the server hosting the site, and your address as the return address. Routers read those addresses and forward the packets to the correct server, and the responses come back to you using your IP address. Without that address, the network would not know where to deliver the page or how to send it back to you. In the vast majority of cases, those exchanges are encrypted via HTTPS, the secure version of the web. You've seen the little padlock in the address bar. Practically speaking, the page contents and your queries are unreadable to third parties. However, some metadata remains visible depending on where you look, the source and destination IP addresses, the time, the duration and volume of traffic, and the site's hostname. That means you can know which service someone connected to and when, but you can't see the content of what was sent. The first goal of an investigation is usually to find out who is behind an IP address, because that's often the fastest and most direct information platforms and websites can provide to investigators. But it's not the only lead. Your operational security, the precautions you take, rests on a mesh of technical and behavioral clues. I'll explain that in simple terms. Imagine you posted under a pseudonym highly threatening messages about the country's president or another prominent person. Don't do that. I'm only using it as an example to explain the process, but this kind of case moves quickly. Platforms will typically cooperate with the authorities and hand over data useful to the investigation. Among those elements, the most important are connection logs, the list of logins to the account with the IP addresses used and precise timestamps, day, hour, minute, second. Those logs give investigators an initial time-based map of accesses. You need to act fast. Some platforms keep these traces only for a short time unless they are frozen. For example, X, formerly Twitter, retains connection logs for 30 days and up to 90 days on request from the authorities, while Google keeps them for several months. Retention periods vary by service and by country, but the idea is the same. The earlier you request the data, the better for the investigation. Investigators usually get several key data points from the platform: the timestamped list of IPs used, the browser type and sometimes the device model, the account's declared information, name, birth date, and at least one phone number or email address linked to the profile. With those elements, you can start tracing back to a real identity. To find out who owns an IP address, an investigator first identifies the operator responsible for that address. They can begin with public IP lookup services, for example, what is my IP address, which quickly show an approximate geographic area and the associated ISP. These tools provide an initial map of exit points and help sort addresses when there are multiple ones, but those sites do not give the subscriber's name. To obtain the real identity, the investigator issues a legal requisition to the ISP. The provider will then consult its assignment logs and report which subscription was using that IP at that time. If you weren't using a VPN and you were on your mobile connection or your home router, the operator will generally provide subscriber details, full name, phone number, and payment methods. If you connected from a parent's router, your partner's, a friend's, or your workplace connection, the IP traces back to the line owner, not automatically to you. That's where the real investigative work begins. The circle of people who had access to that connection at the time must be narrowed. Investigators will look into who frequents that address, how many people live there, their ages, public identities, and online profiles, the phone subscriptions and payment methods linked to the household. They'll also list devices that typically connect: iPhone, Android, MacBook, PC, and note software clues such as the browser used, Chrome, Safari, Firefox, the system language, and other settings that form a technical fingerprint. Those small details help distinguish one user from another. But it's not just technical, it's mainly cross-checking. They'll compare connection times with offline evidence, mobile line geolocation, CCTV, captured connection histories, work schedules, or staff lists. They'll also match identifiers seen in logs, accounts, email addresses, phone numbers, with people likely to have used the line. By filtering and refining, investigators reduce the list until they isolate the suspect. The key idea to remember: using someone else's connection does not automatically make you invisible. The IP gives a starting point. Investigators turn it into an investigative lead by combining technical fingerprints with elements of real life. Let's step up a level. Say you still don't use a VPN, don't worry, we'll get there. And you connect to a neighbor's Wi-Fi that you can pick up from a few dozen meters away, depending on walls and signal strength. How do investigators know it wasn't the neighbor who did it? They'll compare the web activity timestamps with the neighbor's connection history obtained from the ISP. If the usage patterns don't match, for example, the times or the sites visited are unusual, they'll rule out the subscriber and look for who nearby might have used the connection. You also need to distinguish two scenarios. If you create a one-shot account, a throwaway used only once, and never log back in, you might think you reduced the traces. In reality, other signals remain: browser fingerprint, system language, time windows, geographic area. At the first reuse or first slip-up, the chain rebuilds. Conversely, if you connect repeatedly, the chances of correlation skyrocket. One day, you use your home router without thinking. Another day, your 5G connection, and those accesses end up linked together. On the platform side, the process is well-oiled. Investigators pull the connection logs for the targeted account, see which IPs and devices were used, and then trace those back to the corresponding providers. You can also run the operation in reverse, legally. Ask a major email or social network service which accounts used a specific IP during a given time window. Among the noise, it's enough that another account clearly linked to you, a personal email, a professional account, shows up for the cluster of clues to tighten. That's where OPSEC, operational security, comes in. Not tips and tricks, but end-to-end consistency between your tools and your behavior. It's usually inconsistency, not technology, that gives you away. Back to the neighbor's Wi-Fi. Once the line owner is ruled out, investigators focus on the human perimeter. Who lives or works within roughly a 50-meter radius? Which apartments, what schedules, who was likely present, and whether any of those people are known to police. By legal request, they can cross-check useful records, for example, which mobile operators serve that address, or energy subscriptions to see who lives there. And add offline evidence like CCTV. Methodical cross-checking of traces most often ends up pointing to a specific person. Now public Wi-Fi, hotel, cafe, restaurant, co-working space, even without a named registration, the public IP visible on the internet points to the establishment. Investigators will then collect network logs on site. The Wi-Fi controller and router keep connection lists with timestamps, the local IP assigned, and crucially, the MAC address of each device. The MAC address, Media Access Control, is an identifier unique to a network interface visible only on the local network. It lets you distinguish devices and often reveals the manufacturer. Depending on configuration, a captive portal may also record an email, a room number, a phone number, or print a ticket. Using the time window supplied by Twitter or Gmail, you can isolate devices that were connected to the same public Wi-Fi at the same moment. Two typical outcomes follow. Either a personal identifier was entered somewhere in the Wi-Fi flow, the captive portal or reservation, linking the device directly to a person, or you have to cross-check. Investigators review the venue's CCTV, the table layout, who sat where and when. They check card payments and receipts for that time slot. They match those items with the technical device characteristics seen in the logs. Facial recognition can also be used as a supporting tool to identify people who were present. If needed, the scope widens. Exterior cameras to follow movements, mobile operator records to confirm certain phones were in the area at the same time, staff lists and schedules. Are those phone numbers tied to online accounts, known in government files, or linked to banks? Your physical presence in a public place crossed with your device's network fingerprint and the timeline is often enough to tie an online action to a specific person. If you take away only one lesson, it's this. Anonymity mostly depends on the traceability of your data, not just hiding your connection. Everything you provide to browse and register feeds an attribution chain. Example: I create an account on a social network. The email I used has never been associated with an IP that ties me to my real life. I don't fill any profile fields, no real name, no location, no birth date. If I use a phone number that has never been used for personal communications, isn't linked to any other account, and wasn't activated where I live, I limit my traces. Practical tip: a phone number often speaks far more than a well-made disposable email. At every step, ask yourself, what could this identifier have stored and revealed about me? Start from a simple principle. Any platform you use, mail, social network, website, collects data about you. That data can leak, be legally requested, analyzed, and cross-referenced. Map every element point by point and how each one connects to the others. For example, I sign up on a paid platform. My email is used behind a VPN, but I've still provided some information. The service still sees things like approximate location, time zone, system language, and browser type. How does the payment method link me back to my real identity? Credit card, PayPal, crypto with or without identity checks, and so on, link by link. These are the questions you need to ask yourself. When I say in every video that the error sits between the chair and the keyboard, that's not just a catchphrase. Highly skilled cybercriminals have been arrested because of a simple OPSEC mistake. Sooner or later, an exploitable trace ties back to your real identity. Take Ross Ulbricht, the founder of Silk Road, the massive dark web marketplace in the early 2000s. He once posted on a Bitcoin forum using his personal email, rossulbricht@gmail.com, a Google account in his real name. In October 2013, he was arrested in the act, running Silk Road from inside a library. Another case, Alexandra Cases, known as Alpha02, administrator of Alphabay, another huge dark web platform. The welcome email sent to new users contained in its header his old address, pimp_alex_91@hotmail.com. First name, birth year. Investigators then linked it to a 2008 tech forum post where Alpha02 signed as Kazis. Seems trivial, but the facts are clear. The internet never forgets, and you don't control the vast collection of digital traces you've left behind. Pile up enough small traces and eventually they compromise you. Let's go back to the threatening post that triggered an investigation. This time you used a VPN. The goal isn't to break the encrypted tunnel, but to exploit everything around it. The data provided by the platform, the connection metadata, and what the VPN provider can legally hand over. A VPN is an encrypted tunnel between your device and a server. Your ISP only sees the tunnel. The destination side only sees the VPN server's IP. Investigators start from that exit IP with a precise timestamp obtained from the platform, Twitter, Gmail, etc., then contact the VPN. If the VPN keeps logs, they can connect the exit IP and time to a client account and sometimes the original IP of the session. Those are the logs. That's why truly no-log VPNs matter. Don't just trust a slogan, you need proof. Some services branded as no-logs have in fact handed over identifying logs to investigators. Well-known examples, PureVPN in 2017, IPVanish in 2016. When that happens, it's game over. By contrast, when Swedish police raided Mullvad, they walked out empty-handed because nothing was retained. Actions speak louder than marketing. Even a good VPN necessarily processes some technical information to function. Your original IP at the start of the connection, the assigned exit IP, session start and end times, and traffic volume. The difference is in how this data is handled. Kept only in volatile memory, erased at session end, aggregated without personal identifiers, and never stored permanently, and ideally in a jurisdiction that allows such practices. Avoid free VPNs. If it's free, you're the product. Your web traffic is monetized as marketing data. Always choose a paid service trusted by the cybersecurity community. That still leaves the account and payment issue. Many VPNs require an email, which adds another trace. Others, like Mullvad, give you a random account number with no email, which doesn't tie you to your real identity except through the payment method. That's why payment is crucial. You use something truly anonymous. At Proton, for instance, you can get both email and VPN under the same account with a strong privacy policy. Maximize discretion by avoiding personal data and paying without any direct link to your identity whenever possible, cash or Monero. And remember, Bitcoin is traceable. A past purchase through an exchange with ID verification can be traced back to you. Now add to the list of vulnerabilities all the unintentional leaks. A classic trap is the false sense of security. You think the VPN is connected, it disconnects for 3 seconds, and suddenly your real IP is exposed. The fix is called a kill switch, a network circuit breaker that blocks all internet traffic until the encrypted tunnel is established. Ideally, this kill switch runs at the operating system level rather than just as an option inside the VPN app. Another common risk, split tunneling. This feature lets certain apps bypass the VPN while the rest go through the tunnel. It's convenient for a stubborn site or app that refuses VPN connections, but dangerous if you don't control it precisely. If you don't need it, turn it off. If you do, limit it to a single known app and then test carefully that everything else really flows through the tunnel. Next, let's look at the problems that can turn your VPN into a sieve and expose your real IP, DNS and IPv6 leaks. DNS is the internet's phone book that turns a site name into an IP address. If your DNS requests go to your ISP's resolver instead of through the VPN tunnel, you're exposing the list of sites you visit. Same logic for IPv6. The new version of internet addresses. If your device uses IPv6, but your VPN doesn't handle it, some traffic can bypass the tunnel. The simple practical rule is route DNS through the VPN. Enable the VPN client's DNS leak protection and pick a provider that properly supports IPv6. If that's not possible, disable IPv6 on the device for the sensitive session. Run an online leak test before and after configuration to confirm everything is actually contained in the tunnel. I'll drop a link on the channel Discord. On the browser side, WebRTC is a feature designed to handle live audio and video in the browser. To work, it probes your network interfaces and can sometimes reveal your real IP. Left alone, it can bypass the VPN. The workaround is to restrict or disable it when you don't need it, and verify that traffic still goes through the tunnel. JavaScript is the language sites run in your browser to show dynamic content. Useful, but talkative. It can measure your environment, call external resources, and collect device details. On insecure networks, an intrusive captive portal or an unencrypted HTTP page may inject malicious code. The VPN protects the transport, but not the code the site executes in your browser. That's why a well-configured browser and a serious blocker that kills unnecessary third-party scripts are important. Privacy-focused browsers like Tor browser or Mullvad browser disable WebRTC by default and normalize many technical elements. Brave and a properly configured Firefox also offer strong protections. provided you enable the right options and use a strict content blocker for third-party scripts. Also think about metadata that travels with your files. A photo can contain EXIF data with precise info, device model, date and time, sometimes GPS coordinates. Uploading the raw image can be like signing your content. Some platforms strip EXIF, others do not. The safe habit for anything sensitive is to remove that data before uploading with a dedicated tool, or at least disable location recording in your phone camera. Then there's browser and device fingerprinting. Even with a VPN, the combo of screen resolution, installed fonts, extensions, language, time zone, date format, and other parameters can make you unique. For an investigation, that fingerprint lets investigators recognize the same browser across different sessions and link accesses that share the same signature, then cross-reference them with accounts already known. That's why a VPN hides the IP, but your browser can still betray your language, time zone, or specific settings. The best strategy is standardization and separation. Tor browser and Mullvad browser make fingerprints uniform and shared among many users at the cost of a less comfortable browsing experience. Brave blocks many fingerprinting vectors by default, but avoid piling on extensions that recreate uniqueness. Above all, don't mix identities, separate profiles, consistent settings per session, and no crossover between your personal accounts and what you want compartmentalized. Otherwise, the VPN hides the address, but your signature remains identifiable. To unmask a suspect behind an IP, investigators can also use far more intrusive techniques than simple log requests, such as installing spyware. In Anglophone context, this is sometimes called a NIT, a network investigative technique, a law enforcement tool that forces a machine to identify itself by sending data back to investigators. We've seen tools like this used by the FBI in cases where users hid behind Tor, notably during the Playpen operation. In that case, the FBI seized the site's servers and kept it online on agency servers to serve visitors a payload that revealed their real IP addresses, even though they were using Tor to connect. Another, even quieter approach, traps and honeypots. The idea is to get the user to reveal their real IP themselves. For example, you can trick them into opening a booby-trapped document containing a tiny, invisible web beacon, or lure them to a bait site. The moment the file opens or the page loads, a request leaves the machine toward a server controlled by investigators. If the application used bypasses the tunnel because of its own network settings, a real-time component, or an external call, the request goes out directly and exposes the real IP, the browser, the time zone, and other metadata. Canary tokens and honey files embody this idea. Bait files designed to ring an alarm as soon as they're opened and to return information useful for attribution. Recent studies report success rates on the order of 65 to 70% against Tor users and around 40 to 45% against VPN users. Not by breaking encryption, but by exploiting application behavior. Investigators also use targeted implants designed to identify, not to rummage through all content. In Playpen, for example, visitors' browsers received code whose sole purpose was to force a request from the user's machine to reveal its IP and other network identifiers, which led to many arrests. A word on stylometry. It's the analysis of writing style. The words you choose, sentence length, punctuation, recurring turns of phrase. With enough samples, you can link a pseudonymous text to other public writings by the same person. It's not proof by itself, but it's a strong lead. And in 2025, AI is precisely the tool that cross-checks all the rest. You feed it the traces we've been talking about. Timestamps, reused aliases, languages and time zones, browser fingerprints, file metadata, usage habits, and it highlights matches, clusters, and inconsistencies. The goal isn't to magically unmask someone, but to prioritize leads an investigator will then verify technically. Feeding those cross-checks are continuous crawlers, robots that sweep what's public or leaked, profiles and posts, archives, paste bins, Git repos, classified ads, search engine caches, exposed databases. They aggregate raw items, spot near matches of identifiers, harvest document metadata, and rebuild a graph linking accounts, objects, and events. Put together, stylometry, AI correlation, and crawlers don't break a VPN. They exploit your traces to surface a credible lead to be confirmed. The last option when everything else fails is temporal correlation, sometimes called IP catching. The idea is simple. If I know the exact time a given account acted and which VPN server it exited through, I look at the same moment for who connects to that server on the other side of the tunnel. If the same subscriber line shows up at each occurrence, I have my candidate. You don't break anything. You just sync logs. Why does this work? Because a network, even an encrypted one, leaves useful patterns. Your data travels in packets, small envelopes that carry content, and a header. The content, encrypted HTTPS or VPN, is unreadable, but the header and context reveal apparently neutral facts. Who talks to whom, when, and roughly how much data. Those signals pass through key observation points: your ISP, the data center's hosting servers, internet exchange points, where flows transit, and of course the targeted platform itself. States don't have eyes everywhere, all the time, but they can request those metadata or set up targeted observation on those vantage points. You're not opening messages, you're watching the traffic, where it starts, where it arrives, and when. Let's take an example. An X account posts and always connects through a no-log, no KYC VPN. The authorities ask X for its metadata. At a given second, a particular post or login went through a specific VPN exit IP. So we have a list of timestamps and VPN servers actually used. On the other side, investigators query the major ISPs among your subscribers who, during that tiny time window, was talking to that exact VPN server. Repeat the process on other days, other times, and for the other servers seen in the connection logs. Each time you get a short list. Crossing those lists across several days, the same subscriber tends to pop up repeatedly at the right moments. That's temporal correlation in action. You don't need to know what was said, you just observe that whenever the account is active, that subscriber line is talking to the correct server at the same time. Now let's talk multi-hop. Instead of using a single VPN server, you chain several. You first connect to an entry node. It sees your IP but not the final site. Then traffic exits through an exit node. It sees the site, but not your IP. This split can be within one provider, their secure routing, or between two different providers. The idea is simple: fragment the information so no single party has the whole picture. Why does this complicate temporal correlation without defeating it? With a single hop, the site sees the server IP that you contacted. With an exact timestamp, you can ask ASPs who talked to that IP at that instant. With multi-hop, the site only sees the exit IP, one you never directly contacted, so the direct link to the entry is missing. How do you still find the entry? You observe, on the network, the traffic entering the second server to identify the first server feeding it, legally and for a short period. That yields the entry IP, then you query ISPS about that entry IP at the same timestamps. If the multi-hop crosses two providers, you often need two successive pivots: exit, entry of second, initial entry. It's longer, but the principle is identical. A-line clocks on both sides of the tunnel. If the traffic volumes and timestamps match repeatedly, the path is reconstructed. Switching servers frequently or adding hops doesn't break the method. It only increases the number of steps and the resources time required. From the site side, you collect multiple exit, IPS, and times. You pivot on each. From the access side, if the user also changes entry IPs or alternates fixed and mobile, you expand the ISP queries and then cross-check over many days and events. With enough repetition, false positives drop away and the same subscriber lines recur. Important: no log does not mean invisible. A VPN that keeps no historical records prevents retrieving past sessions from that provider, but it doesn't prevent real-time observation at the network edges. The loop always closes the same way. When the same subscriber line shows up repeatedly at the right time slots, investigators confirm with potential OPSEC mistakes and cross-checks tied to real-world life, and identification falls into place. Let's move to another network. In our fictional case, the suspect stops using a VPN and switches to TOR. Tor, the onion router, is often presented as the gateway to the dark web, but it's primarily a network that provides a high degree of privacy, useful for journalists, whistleblowers, and anyone who wants to limit mass surveillance. Tor encrypts your traffic and routes it through three successive relays: an entry node called a guard, a middle relay, and an exit node. Each relay only knows part of the story. The guard sees your IP but not what you visit. The middle relay forwards traffic without knowing details. The exit node sees the final destination, and the content only if the site is not HTTPS, but it does not know your identity. For .onion services, everything stays inside the Tor network. There is no exit to the regular web and the server's IP remains hidden. The people who run all this are volunteers, nonprofits, researchers, hosts, and sometimes universities that install relays in data centers. The software is maintained by the Tor project, but the network itself is decentralized. A small number of directory authorities run by trusted operators publish at regular intervals a consensus. the list of valid Tor relays and their properties. That's what lets your Tor browser choose safe paths. Exit nodes, because they touch the internet in the clear, are often hosted by providers willing to take that load. So how do you investigate Tor users despite this? You don't break Tor. You work the endpoints and observe the network. First, states can ask key players for metadata. An ISP can see that a line connected to a Tor entry node at a specific time. A hoster can see that an exit node spoke to a given platform at the same moment. The platform sees an access coming from Tor. Aligning these clocks over time can be enough to surface a candidate, just like with a VPN, but it's expensive and never guaranteed. Tor is designed to make this correlation hard, notably by limiting guard rotation and by obfuscating timings. Using Tor on general internet traffic is easy to detect, and intelligence services can listen to the web at multiple vantage points and observe millions of connections. Using Tor can, by itself, make you more likely to be flagged as a suspect. Next, there's relay control or relay operations. It's legally straightforward for an agency to rent servers and operate many relays, or to seize relays temporarily at a host. In simple terms, running relays doesn't automatically de-anonymize a target because connections are randomized. But if an adversary controls both your entry node and a significant volume of exit nodes, they can try to correlate incoming and outgoing traffic at the millisecond level. The Tor community monitors this. Waves of suspicious relays have been detected and removed, and the protocol has been patched after known attacks. Still, let's be clear, a very powerful actor that runs or observes enough strategic relays increases their chances of identifying users or .onion services. Law enforcement has mostly exploited edge weaknesses. User-side example, Freedom Hosting in 2013. A Tor browser flaw at the time was used to send visitors real IPs to an investigator's server. Another example, Playpen in 2015. The site was seized and briefly operated by the FBI with a judge's authorization. A NIT, Network Investigative Technique, malware-like code, was served to visitors to exfiltrate IPS and other identifiers. In those cases, you don't break Tor itself. You target the browser or the machine running it. Cookie leaks or identity mixing between regular browsing and Tor browsing also trapped users when a persistent identifier appeared on both sides. Service-side example for .onion sites. Configuration errors sometimes reveal the server's real location. Silk Road didn't fall because Tor was broken, but because a component on the login page loaded a resource from a public IP outside Tor. Poorly secured sites you visit can compromise you. The same goes for admins reusing a TLS certificate or SSH key seen elsewhere. A scan of the public internet can then find the server. A single resource accidentally loaded in the clear is often enough to make the link. Finally, there are more offensive infrastructure ops, running many relays at scale, exploiting a temporary protocol flaw, or trying to inject recognizable patterns into traffic to market. Again, the Tor project has patched multiple vectors over the years, and the core cryptography, onion routing, holds up. What falls first, almost always, are the endpoints. The browser, the OS, a service misconfiguration, or human error. Let's simplify this for our investigation. If an X account is active behind Tor, the platform gives us precise timestamps of activity coming from Tor exits. On the access side, you can see which subscriber lines connect to Tor at those same moments. If the user is flawless and nothing leaks, you're left with bait or implants, or a mistake on the .onion service. Tor does a great job at what it promises to protect, the content and the direct link between an IP and a destination. But history shows infrastructure can be infiltrated, relays can be run by investigators, and the smallest mistake around the network, a misconfigured page, a vulnerable browser, a reused cookie, is enough to break the anonymity. Some users choose Tor over VPN. Technically, they start their VPN, then run Tor browser inside it. From the outside, your ISP no longer sees Tor. It only sees an encrypted tunnel to the VPN. On the Tor side, the guard node sees the VPN's IP, not your real IP. This is useful in two cases: hiding Tor use from a picky ISP or bypassing a basic Tor block. But it's not a magic anonymity shield. You've just added another intermediary you must trust. First weakness, the observation surface grows. You had two edges to watch, your ISP and the platform. You now add a third, the VPN and its host. If a state actor can look at the right places, client ISP, the VPN servers and TOR exits, or the platform, they can try to align clocks and correlate flows. No log prevents digging through a provider's history, not real-time observation if a court orders it at the VPN host. In short, Tor over VPN moves trust and creates an additional observation point. It doesn't remove the possibility of correlation. Second weakness, operational robustness. If the VPN drops and you don't have a solid system-level kill switch, Tor browser may try to reconnect directly to Tor from your real IP. You won't reveal what you did, but you will reveal that you're using Tor at precisely the time investigators are watching. Conversely, if your VPN frequently changes IPs or routes, Tor must reevaluate its guards. More frequent changes increase statistical exposure to bad relays and complicate your threat model instead of improving it. Third point, Tor over VPN does not fix classic mistakes. The exit node still sees your connections to non-encrypted sites. Browser fingerprinting remains possible if you don't use Tor browser as intended. Identity leaks, cookies, accounts, booby-trapped documents are unrelated to the network path and will betray you just the same. Many people feel covered by the VPN and use a regular browser in the same session. Exactly the kind of mix that reconnects the dots. Finally, don't confuse Tor over VPN with VPN over Tor. The first is VPN Tor, what we just described. The second builds a VPN tunnel inside Tor. It's rare, slow, easy to spot from the VPN side, and in most scenarios doesn't improve your anonymity. If your goal is simply to hide Tor from your ISP or bypass censorship, Tor bridges are designed for that, without adding a third party to trust. In short, Tor over VPN can be tactically useful. Discreet toward your ISP helps bypass blocks, but you pay for that with complexity, dependence on a provider, and new observation windows for a determined investigator. If you don't perfectly manage the kill switch, usage isolation, and stick to Tor browser as intended, you more often degrade your anonymity than strengthen it. Back to our X investigation. The suspect abandons the VPN and uses a proxy or a home VPS. Let's recap for those who are new. A proxy server is a very simple intermediary. You tell it, fetch this page for me, it fetches and returns it. From the site's perspective, you see the proxy's IP, not yours. But between you and the proxy, the connection may not be encrypted, and the proxy operator sees your request. When a proxy is free and randomly found, you hand your data to a stranger. Sometimes a curious person, sometimes a service that logs everything. For an investigation, an isolated proxy is easy to trace. You find where it's hosted, you obtain its connection logs if they exist, or you place it under legal observation to see who connects and when. Some people stack multiple proxies to blur the trail. It slows things down, but it doesn't change the rule of the game. If just one link keeps logs or gets compromised, the entire chain collapses. Think of it like tracing a stream by following puddles. The more puddles there are, the longer it takes. But one stagnant puddle can reveal the trickle that leads back to the source. In one investigation, a Belgian hacker had chained over 10 proxies. He was caught because one Asian node logged connections and handed over his original IP. Now the VPS, a VPS, is a small server you rent in a data center, a remote computer you manage yourself. Many people install a proxy, a tunnel, or even a DIY VPN on it. On paper, you control everything. In reality, you're adding a very identifiable actor, the cloud provider. They know which account rented which server, on what dates, and with what payment method. They see which addresses connect to the admin console. And under a court order, they can hand all of this over. If you manage that VPS from home or from a connection linked to you, investigators can stitch it back together in 2 steps. For example, Private Alps offers VPS in Switzerland with no KYC, payable in crypto with root access, encrypted storage, a no-logs host policy, and DDoS protection. From the platform's perspective, the exit IP of a homegrown VPN is always yours, unique all the time. It's your digital uniform. For temporal correlation, it's almost too easy. Who, on the ISP side, talks to that VPS IP at the exact same moments the X account is active? On the cloud side, the VPS ties back to a client account, and the small slips finish the job. An open admin port, a reused key, a certificate duplicated elsewhere, a telling system time zone. Once again, it's not the tech that fails, it's OPSEC. Let's bring our investigation thread together. The X account is routed through a proxy or VPS. The platform provides timestamps, and the exit IP investigators contact the proxy or VPS host, pull whatever logs are available, and ask ISPs who, at those seconds, was talking to that exact server. If it's a chain of proxies, they climb it link by link, country by country. All it takes is one relay that logs, one operator that cooperates, or one misconfiguration, and the chain unravels. That's why, in real life, Proxies, VPS, and homebrew VPNs give an illusion of control, but mostly open new windows of observation for investigators and more chances to leave a puddle on the path. And there you have it. Now you know the main techniques used to trace an identity behind an IP address. Of course, investigators may unmask a real IP and later find it doesn't match the suspect's identity. But between platform cooperation, ISP and hosting records, human error, network surveillance, temporal correlation, and data cross-matching, the arsenal is vast. Against someone well-informed, it may still take a long time. True anonymity demands solid OPSEC, an understanding of OSINT methods, and flawless network and browser hygiene. Finally, it's important to highlight the international scale of these investigations. Intelligence services from different countries increasingly cooperate through Europol, Interpol, and others. During Operation Anonymous, a joint FBI-Europol coalition acted simultaneously in multiple countries. Likewise, Operation Cookie Monster in 2023 against Genesis Market saw 17 countries act together. This kind of cooperation combines technical intelligence, SIGINT, with traditional human. For example, French domestic intelligence, DGSI, might provide local details on a suspect, while the NSA provides raw network data and Europol coordinates the warrants. Tor remains an excellent option when used properly. With Tor browser as is, ideally on a system designed for isolation like Tails or CubesOS. It's built to normalize fingerprints, compartmentalize usage, and limit leaks, but as we've seen, it's not magic. So here's the takeaway. Separate your identities, control your access points, check for leaks, and understand what the edges of the network see and what services keep. That discipline, not stacking tools, is what makes the difference over time. If you want to keep following along, subscribe to the channel, don't forget to like and share. Got questions? Want to dive deeper? Join me in the comments or on Discord. And remember, the error is always between the chair and the keyboard.